for lawyer Joseph Molina Flynn, attorney in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, president of the Rhode Island Latino PAC. Joseph, thanks for coming back in today.
Thank you for having me.
I
Always
appreciate
a pleasure.
your coming in to let folks know next steps with DACA. If people have been following the news, we saw the arbitrary deadline come and go yesterday where Trump said, Congress, you need to act by March 5th. Has come and gone. What's happening? Let's start first in D.C. and then we'll get a little more local. What's your sense about what's going to happen?
We've had part of this discussion previously, and I think the deadline was always just an arbitrary deadline. There wasn't anything of substance there. Of course, DACA has been in existence for more than 5 years, and Congress hasn't done anything to codify the benefits of DACA in the past 5 years, since 2012 when it was first the executive order was first issued. And so the hopes that something was going to get done in 6 months were always just a falsity. And now what we need to do is we need to put pressure on our elected officials to make sure that they're doing something to come up with a comprehensive bill that would take care of these individuals who are so interwoven into our fabric.
And so are we, hanging in, as you said, you didn't think anything was going to happen come March 5th. The hope is still something substantial will happen. Let's talk a little bit about the Supreme Court's decision not to take up the case.
So that's very telling because it tells us that the Supreme Court isn't ready yet to decide on this issue. Particularly, I believe that it has to do with the political nature of what's going on. I don't think they're ready to tell these individuals that they don't have hope for the future, but I think they see their role as limited in this respect. And they're going to wait until more happens at the lower courts before they make a decision that is too precipitated. What's more interesting is what's going on at the federal courts at the lower levels. Like there's been some decisions that have placed an injunction on the elimination of the program, which has allowed us as immigration practitioners to renew applications. And if somebody's coming up on renewal anytime within the next 6-7 months, I would recommend that you get in touch with an immigration practitioner to renew your DACA immediately. I myself got 2 grants the other day for some of my clients, and so they are renewing them now. But we saw the decision out of Maryland just on Monday where that court decided that the president was within his power to eliminate the program as he did, and that there's no right for the DACA recipients to continue renewing their DACA. And so we're sort of in flux. It kind of depends on where you live right now. Rhode Island is fortunate in the sense that in our circuit at least, they're still accepting the applications and adjudicating them, but beware and act promptly.
And we're talking about Maryland. We're talking, as you said, at the more federal, going down to more states level. Will people move? Will dreamers move? Or is there just so much uncertainty that they don't want to go someplace new because a court in that new place could very well say what they said in the old one?
Right, and so that is very well true, that I don't believe that people are going to move simply based on the court decisions. I do believe that eventually, once there are more of these lower court decisions, it will probably make its way back up to the Supreme Court if there has been no congressional action, and then by then the issue might be ripe for the court to decide. So these lower court decisions, while they may not directly impact our population, they do have a potential to impact the future of the legislation. It's kind of a weird game that we're playing with DACA because it's being supposedly, there's an attempt to get some legislation passed, while at the same time there's this very heated battle going on in the courts, and I think the courts are sort of afraid to act because they don't want to impinge upon the legislative process, but the legislative process is at a standstill, and so nothing is really happening.
And you're an immigration attorney, practice both in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Numbers-wise, how many dreamers do you see? I mean, I don't want to say daily or weekly, but how much are your practices dealing with DACA?
So my practice doesn't deal with DACA too much, even though I do these cases pro bono, just because I think DACA recipients are very savvy. These are particularly easy forms to complete. They've been going through this process since 2012, so a lot of them do it on their own or through nonprofits in the community that help them. But I do know that the population of DACA recipients in Rhode Island is estimated to be about 3,300 individuals. And of those 3,300 people who are eligible, about 1,200 of them actually have DACA right now.
Okay.
And so it's not an insignificant part of our community. And I think what people need to understand about these DACA recipients is that they're working in our hospitals, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're people who have been productive in society. They're not just schlepping by.
And let's go back to DC again. The president giving this arbitrary March 5th deadline. Why can't this get done?
Well, because they've sort of bootstrapped it to a lot of other things, as they usually do in Washington, and our good friends, the elected officials, are quick to cave on DACA in order to get other things passed. And look, in politics, you have to understand some compromises need to be made, but I think some people need to own up to the fact that that's what they're doing and let the community know that that's what's happening, rather than sort of cower behind the pronouncements that are coming out of the president's office, because the truth of the matter is you can't put any stock in what's coming out of that office anyway because it oscillates so much. But we do need to hold our elected representatives who are supposed to be representing our interests accountable for not standing their ground.
What's the general sense from people that you talk to, whether it be clients or members of the community, with seeing the March 5th deadline coming and going? Is the level of uncertainty just really permeating folks who have lives here and have a fear factor of what could potentially happen? There
is a lot of anguish, and particularly we saw with the case of Lillian Calderon, who was apprehended at her interview at immigration just a couple of months ago. DACA recipients, and she didn't have DACA, right? But DACA recipients are afraid that if their DACA doesn't get renewed, this is what will start to happen to them. They lose their jobs daily because their DACA isn't renewed, and these are good paying jobs. This means that if they own a home, they can no longer afford to pay their mortgage because you also can't collect any unemployment. If you have kids to support, you can no longer support your kids. And so there is a lot of anguish out there about what's going on. I get messages constantly about the anxiety of what's happening and what is going to happen. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of answers right now.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come in and break it down for us here, as again, we saw the March 5th deadline come and go. You're continuing to have meetings with the Rhode Island Latino PAC while I have you in here. How are things shaping up for the 2018 election season?
They're good. We are fundraising, obviously. That's a big goal of ours for this year, to make sure that the electorate understands that the Latino voter bloc is a bloc to be reckoned with, particularly in this year when issues like DACA and education are so important. And I will say to the DACA point that even though this is a federal issue, there are measures that our state can take to protect these individuals. And we would urge the local electorate to also pay attention to what's going on with DACA, try to pass some protections, because the Latino voter bloc is paying attention to what's going on with this. 75% of the Rhode Island community at large agrees that there should be protections in place for DACA, and that's very telling. So we're basically imploring at this point for our elected officials to do something.
Well, we'll continue to talk with you, have you in here, let folks know both the take on the national and the local level. So Joseph Molina Flynn, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Kate.
I'll have you in soon.
Absolutely.
Okay, Attorney Joseph Molina Flynn, we've had him in here to talk about a myriad of issues. Today, talk about the DACA deadline passing in DC yesterday, and the arbitrary one set by President Trump. Looking to see what happens next. Again, also the president of the Rhode Island Latino PAC. I'm sure we'll talk politics with Joseph very soon. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We'll be right back.